The magnitude of the Eurozone crisis was more evident during the spring meeting of the World Bank and the IMF in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago. The attention that Europe received compared with other regions like Africa was minimal. This did not go down well with some African journalists who attended the meeting.
Africa has received very little attention in terms of the discussions and the meetings that have taken place. The attention has basically been on Europe and Middle East and North Africa. Very little has been said about Sub-Saharan Africa.
If you look at the program, the slots that have been allocated to Africa specifically are very negligible. Yeah, most of the time they are giving priority to Asia and Europe.
Analysts from the Bretton Woods institutions were upbeat about the bouncing back of the global economy at the end of last year had no option than to revise their notes. This time round, they painted a bleak picture with Europe leading the pack of slow economic growth drivers. And this is how the managing director of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, put it.
There is a bit of a recovery, timid and a fragile situation with still high risks.
The spending cuts and raising of taxes measures being implemented by governments in the Eurozone can largely be blamed for the slow economic growth resulting in high unemployment. Those studies are yet to be done on the quantum of revenue Africa stands to lose from the joblessness in Europe. It is certain that most of the people caught in the web of unemployment are migrants, with some from Africa, including Ghana. These may affect remittances to Africa, including Ghana, though data from the World Bank show global remittances are expected to exceed $593 billion by 2014, of which $441 billion will flow to developing countries. Remittances sent home by migrants to developing countries are 3 times the size of official development assistance and represent a lifeline for the poor. For instance, remittance flow to Ghana was up from $140 million in 2010 to $119 million in 2011. However, Mr. Yusufa Krug says the implications of the Eurozone crisis on Ghana's economy will be enormous if the trend of job losses continue.
What happens in Europe has huge implications for your export. Non-traditional exports have a much tougher time in markets, and there are other implications for government in terms of revenue flows into the countries and the impact all of this has on the Ghanaian macroeconomy. Having said that, so we cannot be bystanders to what happens in Europe. What happens in Europe is quite important. But also what happens in Ghana, as in other countries, is also quite important. How Ghana reacts to the kind of risks that this presents to its economy is also quite important.
He gave suggestions about what can be done to reduce the impact of expected decrease in foreign exchange earnings through non-traditional exports.
Clearly, there are losses of income for people. How is Ghana preparing for that loss of income for the population? What are the systems in place to shore up particular sectors that suffer greatly where markets start contracting in a big way, where basically revenues of the government are fairly dependent on exports, on export-related activities? How does government compensate with those losses in revenue arising from shocks?
Ghana stands at a crossroad with the Eurozone crisis because for some time now, her foreign exchange earnings from commodities like gold, oil and cocoa have surged. The demand is from emerging economies like China and Brazil. However, with about 52% of her exports going to the European market and vice versa, she has to work hard to ensure that the high unemployment in Europe does not affect her export and import bill to the detriment of the gains made so far. Edward Nyakun, reporting for GTV News.